Here's what I've learned to be true in this changing of minds piece is it's very, very difficult, bordering on impossible to move a no to a yes or a yes to a no. It's highly possible and proven on repeat to you move a yes to a maybe and a maybe to a no, or a no to a maybe and a maybe to a yes. It's like this passing through of a gray space. Something I regularly teach, and I don't even know the science behind it, and I'd love to understand it more, is I give a direct piece of advice, which is to never, ever, ever speak in absolutes. And I know that that in itself is a little counterintuitive, is to use an absolute to say to never speak in absolutes, but I think it makes the point. And I've learned that you can create a lot more change in others if you could say, well, you know, many people in your situation. If you never say everybody, you never say nobody, you never say like always or every single, but you create movement that people can step towards and opt out in. I know that works. Why does that work?
There's a great book. Well, I say it's a great book. It's a very heavy book and a very dry book, but it's a very powerful book that was written in the 1930s called Science and Sanity. Okay. And it was written by a guy called Alfred Korzybski. He's the guy who the phrase, the map is not the territory, comes from that. And in a nutshell, one of the things he talks about is this field he calls general semantics. And it's the notion that the way in which we describe the world and the way in which we talk about the world has an impact and an influence in the way in which people perceive it. So there's a few years after that, based upon the work of Korzybski, a guy called David Bourlan came up with this language called E prime. And E prime is language without the verb to be. So instead of me saying, that is terrible, you have to say, that seems terrible to me. And so with the general semantic stuff and with the Bourlan stuff, it's really about indexing all your thoughts. So I can't use always and never and every. And sometimes we don't even use always, but it's almost presupposed silently.
Yes.
We don't say the word, but yet we're presupposing this is what it is. And the more accurately we can actually describe our experience, the more we're saying, this is how I perceive the world. The more likely we are to be able to have better conversations, but also to think healthier. Okay. Most of the same cognitive distortions that from a CBT perspective, cognitive behavioral therapy, most of the distortions that they challenge are things like generalizations, the all or nothing thinking, all those kind of things are the same things that we challenge whenever we look at decision making in business and cognitive biases. It's always about figuring out, and I say always, recognizing when we label that and understanding that most of the language we have, as NLP, neuro-linguistic program would say, is we delete information, we distort information, and we generalize information. And in doing so, we formulate these all or nothing generalizations, which is, again, easy for us to do. Our brains like it. It's simple. Other people can get it. The problem is it's not accurate.
And it creates conflict.
And it creates conflict because it's not accurate. Because every single time you say immediately there's always going to be counterexamples. And part of your job is when you're changing beliefs is to find the counterexamples to get them to realize. And even better, something that you do is you get them to find the counterexamples. Okay. So you say, has there ever been a time where this wasn't true? And all of a sudden they go, well, and that's when you start to move them towards doubt, or in your case, that's when you start to move them towards the middle, right? So it's no longer a yes, it's now the middle, it's now a maybe, and then you move them towards the no. But the only way we can do that, again, the only way, is to recognize these patterns happening and not to stop saying, it's like, we'll still use the word but, we'll still use the word only, we'll still use the word always. But when we realize the way we do it, and when we notice it happening and you notice other people, then we can start to get to the bottom of, well, it's not always, it's not every. And we can start to target in on what really matters and what's really going on and what's really accurate for their actual experience.
Now, I speak at a lot of conferences and conventions, but one of the things that I see often have the biggest impact on people isn't the tactical keynote presentation from somebody like myself. It maybe is just somebody stepping up on stage on the platform and sharing with somebody their story of what they've achieved, and that in turn creates new beliefs in others. What other ways outside of books and conferences can people change their environment that gives them the chance to be able to bump into new data that could change their beliefs?
Well, I don't think it's just about changing their environment. I think it's also about forming. So we all talk about the growth mindset, Carol Dweck's, if you believe you can improve your abilities. I talk about what I call the belief growth mindset, which is having the mindset that says that I can update my priors if I experience new things, new situations. So I think one of the things, and you could argue that it's another way of saying to be open-minded, but we really have to be effective at that. We have to stop and learn to be actually rewarded mentally whenever we get things wrong, whenever we update our beliefs. So two people could go to a conference. One of them changes their beliefs, the other doesn't. One of them learns to transform their life, the other one doesn't. What's the difference between the two? One of them went there already with the confirmation bias to look for evidence to prove they're right and to dismiss evidence of contradiction. The other one goes in going, I really want to be wrong about this. I want to learn new things. It's almost like the humility of being able to go, what is it that I can get from this? And therefore, when they go to the exact same event, the exact same speaker, the exact same story, the story hits one person and doesn't hit the other because the other person's already telling themselves a story that is preventing them from taking on the wisdom. Like that would never work for me. Well, it's easy for her to say. Whereas the other person is going, oh shit, maybe this will work for me. Oh, well, that's interesting. And it's really the mindset we take into it. And this belief growth mindset means that it's much easier for us to be able to change our beliefs because we start with that. The problem is, and we've talked about this before, but the problem is so often we're desperately trying to be right as opposed to become right. And what I mean is we're trying to be right in the moment as opposed to playing the real game. And the real game is to be able to continuously expand our knowledge. And Socrates was doing this years ago. I mean, he was, he ended up not having a good result after it. It wasn't a good long game he played because he ended up having to drink hemlock. But he would ask questions, getting people to realize you're not as right as you think you are. And the reason it pissed people off was because no one likes uncertainty and no one likes to be challenged. But that doesn't mean that they were right. It just means that they didn't like it. But he was trying to get to wisdom. And true wisdom is knowing what you don't know and understanding that even what you do know is probability. And I think so often we live in a world, and this is something that really helps people to change beliefs. We live in a world where we think in terms of didactically, I'm right or wrong. We don't think in terms of probability. We don't think in terms of there's multi-factors that might be causing this. And we instead try to simplify it for our brain's sake to go, oh, this is the way it is. Mm-hmm. You're right, I'm wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. And that's really not reality, because in reality, there's always confusion. There's always, it's competing stories. I'm telling you a story, you're telling me a story. Well, they're stories. They're not facts. The stories are the interpretation of facts. And once we start to dive in and explore that, we get to realize there's a lot of stuff that I need to open my mind to. And that's what allows me. And it could be anything. You could be talking to your kid and your kid changes your belief in a moment. I was driving with my dad, and my dad is not any into personal development, but he's like the closest, him and my mom, I'm very, very close to. And we're driving in the car and I'm talking about, this, and he's pretty happy, generally speaking. And I would instead be very much naturally, I struggled with depression when I was a kid. I'm like naturally quite dark and, I win the battle, but I'm still, it doesn't come natural to me. And I said to him, for you, what is the key towards, like, how come you're so pretty much happy with things? Have you got such a great attitude? And he's, quite religious. And he just turns to me and says, well, I think about, how bad other people have it and how lucky I am to not be in this situation. And it's completely like, it's not something I haven't heard a million times before, but the way in which he said it in that moment profoundly affected me. Like, I kept thinking about it over and over again, because it comes from someone who's not studying psychology, not studying self-improvement, not studying anything. His religious background, sure, but he's thinking to himself, how lucky am I? He's thinking about the worst case scenario. And very few people in my field or our field would be saying that as advice, going, think about how bad it could be.
Well, he's giving himself a comparison, right? Yes. That's what he's actually doing. He's contrasting out the spectrum of where he is on his field of play. And I think what it allows many of us to be able to think about is how do you zoom out so your belief has more perspective?
Yeah.
How do you zoom out to be able to say compared to what? And then, I think most people see things as either better than they are or worse than what they are. It's hard to be able to see things exactly as it is. Mm-hmm. And it can only be seen exactly as it is when there's enough context.
Yeah.
Easiest way to find more context is to zoom further out. And therefore, your dad can look at things and say, well, given this new environment that I've just been able to position and judge myself within, I'm doing pretty damn good. I got nothing to complain about. I've got plenty to be happy about.
But the problem as well, Phil, is that we it's not like all information is equal. So we're accessing information that is very much nowadays in society, very much driven by algorithms that are not making it easy to do that. So
Sure.
you go on social media, it's very easy for you to feel lesser than, because you're comparing yourself to the best case version of everyone else. Like the amount of mental health challenges that are happening. And it's not just because of social media, but social media is one of the vehicles that's making it easier for me to look around and go, everybody is killing it except for me. Everyone is on vacation or holiday except for me. Everyone is making more money except for me. Everyone's got this perfect relationship. And so we compare ourselves to all of these things outside. So it's not just we zoom out. It's when we zoom out, what are we able to see then? And if all you're being given from an informational standpoint is reaffirming this belief, doesn't matter how much we zoom out.